We kept the freezer running for 27 years, because something inside must never wake up. If you're reading this, if this message ever makes it out of storage site A0, then maybe there's still time. Maybe someone will learn from what we did, or maybe it's already too late. I was transferred to A0 8 months ago, stepping into a position that no one ever left voluntarily. They called it a long-term isolation and climate systems maintenance assignment, but the truth was simpler and far more horrific. We were the last line of defense, keeping something imprisoned that should never, ever again meet warm air or human eyes. Most facilities like this receive deliveries, send shipments, rotate stock. Ours didn't. Nothing arrived. Nothing left. All day, every day, our job was the same: keep the core vault at -32 degrees Celsius or lower. No exceptions. The freezer compressors were huge, loud machines, oversized far beyond normal engineering logic, drawing enough power to light a small town. I asked why we never shut down to cycle systems or run standard inspections. My supervisor, an exhausted man with hands that trembled even at rest, simply said, "You'll understand if the temperature ever hits -30. I thought he was being dramatic. Then I started noticing the signs. At first, it was little things: inspection cameras inside the vault fogging instantly because the temperature resistance wasn't enough, frost forming on the inner doors in precise, ridged shapes, almost like ridged knuckles or long, reaching digits. Every maintenance log from the last 27 years included phrases like resist pattern growth, do not touch the window, scratching increasing. But no one ever wrote what was inside. We just called it the specimen. The truth was, most staff were scared to describe it, as if naming it might draw its attention. Inside the vault was a single reinforced containment chamber, round with a porthole just 6 inches across, thick enough to stop small arms fire. The first time I looked through, I expected to see an artifact, a corpse, maybe some kind of fossil. But I saw nothing except frozen air swirling in the blue haze. Still, I felt something. Like standing at the edge of a vast ocean trench. Something was down there. Something aware. The shift schedules were brutal. We worked in teams of 4, rotating every 6 hours to monitor system readouts, fuel levels, compressor strain, duct temperatures, and frost behavior. The frost was the scariest part. Every single night it crept further up the vault walls, not spreading randomly but forming symmetrical, branching lines, like veins, or fractured ice following the map of a circulatory system. When we scraped them away, new patterns formed within minutes. The same shapes. The same angles. As if the ice itself was learning. Then came day 164, the night everything snapped. An alarm shrieked through facility A0, temperature rising. The main readout displayed -31.4 degrees Celsius and climbing. Every technician in the facility sprinted to emergency stations. I saw them split into practice trolls, activate backup coolant, overload compressors, seal the vault floor hatch. These procedures weren't in any manual. They weren't supposed to exist. Someone had drilled them into staff generations ago and passed them on through whispers. That's when I heard the sound. Scratching. Not like fingernails. More like jointed bone scraping against steel, deliberate and slow. The lights flickered, dust shook from the ductwork, and I felt, for the first time, the horrifying truth: something inside was trying to climb out. The scratching turned into a rhythmic tapping, methodical, intelligent. Something was communicating. One of the senior engineers, a woman who had worked here 6 years longer than anyone else, started shaking her head and backing away from the core vault door. "Don't look at the window," she ordered. "Whatever you hear, don't look." Then the voice came, not a human voice, not even a word. More like 2 icicles snapping together, forming meaning as cold sound. Every hair on my body stood up. My eyes drifted toward the window against my will. The frost was shifting, melting and reforming, creating the faint outline of something pressing from the other side, 12 elongated digits ending in hooked, jointed spikes. Not fingernails. Claws. The scratching stopped. Dead silence. Everyone froze. That was rule number 3. If it stops making noise, it's listening. We powered everything to maximum. The compressors groaned, metal shrieked, the entire concrete foundation vibrated with effort. Slowly, agonizingly, the temperature began to drop. After 26 minutes of unbearable tension, the scratching resumed, this time weaker. The ice claw shapes retreated from the porthole, and the vault temperature eased back to -32.6 degrees Celsius. The supervisors didn't celebrate. They sagged. They'd seen close calls before. Later that night, One of the technicians didn't report for rotation. We found his badge on the floor outside the containment door, embedded halfway through a thick sheet of ice as if something had pressed it in with incredible force. No body. No blood. Just his badge and a gouge in the ice like a bite mark. HR filed it as accidental walk-off during emergency. We all knew it was nonsense. No one argued. The next day, I finally learned the truth. Years ago, a deep earth mining expedition drilled through a chamber 15 kilometers below the surface, older than known civilization, older than mammals. Inside was a living organism encased in ancient ice, perfectly preserved. But still metabolizing. They thought it was dormant. They transported it here. They were wrong. Warmth didn't kill it. Warmth woke it. It didn't need sunlight. It didn't need oxygen. It just needed the temperature to rise enough for its body to come alive again. And every decade, the heat of machinery, Earth's shifting pressure, and maybe even the creature itself made the vault a little harder to cool. The systems were old. The ice was thinning. And we were the only thing keeping whatever that thing was from thawing completely and seeing a world full of surface cities waiting like prey. This is why we never shut the facility down. Why we never left. Why everyone who worked here aged with a kind of terror carved into their bones. Because if the temperature ever climbs high enough, if the structure fails, if we abandon our posts, there won't be survivors. There won't even be bodies. Whatever is in that vault doesn't devour flesh. It erases existence. Entire geographic areas have been lost in the file archives, officially written off as earthquakes, sinkholes, forgotten settlements. But those of us here have seen the patterns. We've read old military documents. Twice before, the temperature rose enough for it to move freely. Both times, entire towns vanished without a single scream recorded. Right now, as I finish this log, the temperature is rising again. Another 0.2 degrees Celsius in the last hour. The metal doors are frosting outward instead of inward, as if something inside is exhaling. The frost patterns are merging into one shape now, a humanoid silhouette with far too many elbows and joints. I hear the tapping again, slow, patient, thoughtful, like someone learning Morse code. I know what I need to do. Stay. Freeze. Hold it down as long as I can. But if you ever stumble across this facility, don't try to save me. Don't send soldiers. Don't attempt containment protocols. Just shut the power grid down and let the entire building collapse into a tomb of ice and steel. Let the cold bury it forever. Because if it melts, the world will feel the tapping next. After I wrote those words, the facility went silent in a way that didn't feel empty, it felt watched. The generators were screaming as they pushed beyond safe limits, coolant pumps rattling against their bolts, vents coughing fog into the metal hallways like the entire building was gasping. And somewhere deep in the vault, beneath meters of old industrial steel and reinforced walls, something was moving, slow, confident, aware. I used to think the monster only reacted on instinct. But after that night, I understood the truth. It was learning us. Listening. Mapping us. Testing every threshold, every panic response, every weakness. We weren't just trying to freeze a creature. We were playing tug-of-war with an intelligence older than anything humanity ever dug up. 3 hours after the tapping began, the temperature spiked again. Not rapidly, which is what we feared before, but gradually, deliberately. That terrified the senior techs more than any alarm ever could. Machines don't heat slowly without reason. The temperature wasn't rising from mechanical failure. It was rising because something inside was generating heat on purpose. The creature was awakening in stages. Then the lights failed. The emergency bulbs flickered to life, bathing the hallways in red. We gathered in the central control chamber, staring at the monitors as the numbers crept upward, -31.8 degrees Celsius, -31.6 degrees Celsius, -31.5 degrees Celsius. Every decimal was a death sentence. The facility had never been above -31.5 degrees Celsius for more than 5 minutes in 27 years. And I knew why. Because when it passed that line, the scratching became something else. On the intercom, a system completely disconnected from the vault, static began to pulse. Not randomly. Rhythmically. The same beat as the tapping on the vault door. I felt something inside me lock up, some primal part of the human brain that still knew how to fear predators evolution never prepared us for. Everyone in the room froze, not because we'd been trained to, but because the message wasn't meant for our ears. It was testing language. It was calibrating the human nervous system. The static shifted pitch and cadence until the tapping on the intercom matched the beating of a human heart. One of the technicians, Marlowe, began hyperventilating. Then he dropped to his knees, eyes wide, staring straight ahead as if the lights had gone out inside him. He whispered, "It remembers us." We tried to snap him out of it, but he didn't respond. He just pressed his ear to the metal floor like he was listening. I had to pull him away before he pressed his head hard enough to crack it. He didn't struggle. He just looked at me with eyes full of something I still can't define. Not terror. Recognition. That was when the temperature fell suddenly. The pumps roared, gauges flicked from red to blue, and for a moment we all let out the breath we'd been holding. We'd won the round. But the creeping understanding was worse. It had stopped trying. It had let the temperature fall. Like a predator stepping back into the brush to watch the camp regroup, to see how we behaved after a failed breakthrough. It was strategizing. We started rotating manual inspections at 20-minute intervals. The frost on the observation window had changed again. No claws this time. No limbs. Now the frost formed the faint outline of a face, not human, not symmetrical, but with too many deep-set ridges and cavities that suggested an anatomy not made for a warm light. The eyes weren't eyes. They were just deeper cold. And somehow, looking at them made me feel as if I was falling forward into them, down and down into layers of ice thick enough to crush steel. We activated the blackout screens, but even with the window hidden, the sensation didn't leave. It had seen us. No. It already knew us. The next 48 hours were spent in a state between terror and procedure. We upgraded coolant lines, sealed every duct, re-insulated the central core, and rechecked every pipe joint by hand because digital readouts were beginning to glitch. Sometimes they showed temperatures impossible to achieve, -70°C, then +800°C, then blank. Tech support on the outside told us it was interference, a cabling fault, a sensor flaw. They didn't understand. They didn't hear the tapping through the walls. They didn't smell the cold, because cold has a smell when it's alive. Every time the system stabilized, something small went wrong somewhere else. A pressure gauge loosened. A sensor unscrewed itself half a turn. A coolant pipe clamp sheared off with no sign of strain. Nothing dramatic enough to cause immediate failure, but enough to show it was probing the infrastructure, memorizing its anatomy the way a killer learns a house before striking. But the worst event came on day 175. We heard footsteps. Not human footsteps, no weight, no heel, no vibration. Just soft, gliding movement over the concrete, moving down the central hallway outside the vault. The sound paused at each door, listening through them, searching. I stared at the motion feed cameras. Empty hallways. No thermal signatures. Nothing to explain how something that cold could move through a building made of metal and refrigerants without showing heat. Then, outside the control room door, the footsteps stopped. And the intercom clicked. A voice, not human, not possible, came through. "Let us see your sky." We didn't speak. No one moved. Even the vents seemed to hold their breath. And then it said something that shattered me. "We saw you once before." The others didn't understand. But I did. If the creature had been discovered 27 years ago, that meant it existed long before, buried deeper, older than archaeology suggested. If it remembered humans, it meant we had woken it before. Maybe thousands of years ago. Maybe it had walked the earth during the first civilizations. And maybe those civilizations vanished without explanation because they let it thaw. I didn't sleep for 36 hours. When I did, I dreamed of a place without warmth, where cities hung suspended like fossils inside glacial cavities, entire populations frozen midlife, perfectly preserved. Not dead. Just waiting. We doubled power requirements, began planning emergency shutdown sequences, and debated the unthinkable, blowing the facility and burying it under millions of tons of rock and frozen earth. But one argument stopped us. What if that shattered the vault? What if breaking the cage freed it? In the middle of that argument, the power grid surged. Lights flickered. Something heavy struck the far side of the vault door. No attempt at subtlety. This was no test. This was a push. Trees bend before they break. Steel sings before it splits. And that door. It sang. We rushed to overload the coolants, dumping entire reserves of liquefied gas into the core lines. Temperatures plummeted, -32.4°C, -33.1°C, -35.9°C. The vault shook again, once. Twice. And then fell silent. And above the observation port, frost bloomed in a perfect circle, like a handprint made of negative heat. It wasn't angry. It was disappointed. That's when I realized something horrifying. We weren't preventing it from waking up. We were keeping it entertained between attempts. This thing had patience measured in geological eras. It could wait while we aged, while nations rose and fell, while entire species lived and died. And each time power spiked, systems failed, or coolant lines aged, the vault temperature would rise a tiny bit higher than decades before. Like a predator slowly pulling the bars apart over centuries, knowing the zookeepers would eventually die. And one day, one inevitable day, the temperature will rise far enough, the metal will flex thin enough, and the safeguards will run out. On that day, cities won't be destroyed. They'll simply go missing again, vanishing into frozen silence, stolen into a world beneath the permafrost that humans have only glimpsed in nightmares. The creature isn't just surviving. It's expanding. Reaching. Looking for a way home, or perhaps, a way back to the surface it once owned. As I write this, the temperature is rising again. Another 0.1 degrees Celsius. The frost has begun shaping letters on the viewport, crude but unmistakable. Soon. There is no more doubt left. The others have retreated to try and stabilize the lower compressor banks. I'm alone in the control room, listening to the tapping through the ductwork like a countdown. I know, finally, what I have to do. And I know why no predecessor ever retired. Someone has to stay. Someone has to freeze with it. If these logs ever surface, if a rescue team ever finds this place, don't investigate. Don't restore power. Don't try to open the vault or salvage technology. Let the building collapse. Let winter bury it in silence again. Because if the world feels the tapping next, it won't stop at one facility. It will follow the heat. It will follow life. And the last sound humanity ever hears may be something ancient knocking patiently through every wall on Earth, waiting for us to open the door.